What up, what up, what up, what up, what up, everybody? Puff Puff class number 11. Um, yeah, I don't know. Just took like life stuff. I mean, not obviously, but still in the PhD program, still working, still doing the damn thing, studying, reading, all that stuff. Haven't been uploading here for a little bit because I've just been dealing with taking a break for some self-care, some mental health care, just trying to stay focused on what it is that I'm trying to do with this whole thing without burning out. And it's not even doing this because I really enjoy doing this isn't the portion of my life that gives me burnout, but just some like externalities that definitely threw me for a loop. And so I'm just trying to not have, I don't know, like I like doing things, but as soon as I feel like extremely attached to the productivity of doing things, then I feel like, what I'm trying to do goes a little bit out the window. It's a very interesting, seemingly counterintuitive kind of thing that I have to work between all the time. It's like actually practicing the notions of like liminality, like interconnectedness that kind of are a big part of what I'm trying to think about with like non-duality, post-colonial studies, as they relate to like Hindu philosophy and modernist, postmodernist literature. There's all these ways to consider the world, and like how you work is a big consideration, trying to figure out exactly what it is that your flow is like, and what are your whys, what are your reasons for doing something. And like for me, doing anything for like the sake of productivity itself, sometimes I get attached to that, like the outcome or reception or like whatever potential end result is supposed to be, or that I feel is supposed to be at the end of doing something, which kind of takes away from the process of doing something, and it's just like the doing shit that makes me happy. And like you see a lot of, you see like there's like lots of this type of shit, like the shit that got me interested in wanting to do something like this, like the J Skulls type, like streaming regularity, constancy, and output, and like nothing against that. I commend the fucking shit out of it. It's inspirational. It moves me in a very, very practical and spiritual way. But also, that's like not what I'm trying to do. Not to say that the work itself is not difficult. I know he streams doing like, I think he's computer science or something like that, and I'm humanities, so it's definitely a different workload, a different, just like a different workflow of productivity, of things that you need to do, amount that you need to do, ways you need to do it. There's certainly something to be said for doing it like that, but I'm doing that shit kind of like living my life anyway. Like just that's by nature of like humanities work, like always reading, thinking about ideas, like letting my mind go on like tangential research holes, and then trying to find my way back to what I'm interested in. But I do think this is very helpful because, like I said, I was dealing with some like personal issues that were weighing hard on my mental health, and so I kind of took a step back from this to focus on that stuff while still doing what I need to do for school and such. But this, taking the time to do this, is for me like a very, very happy and freeing thing, and it just allows me to kind of sit here and be with my thoughts and remind myself like why exactly I got into this in the first place. Because man, AI coming around, humanities, as in general over the last like couple of decades, it's like the difficulty in describing its value, or describing its value to people outside of humanities or in general life, which I believe it has a great deal of, but it's like I don't know, it just makes you think about like, oh, I should be like doing something with this to make it like bigger or something, and or I should, should I just move towards like doing a YouTube thing, or like being an entertainer in somewhere, or edutainer or something like that, like blending education and entertainment. But I don't really, all that stuff gives me like hella anxiety too. So just like sitting here and being able to like think about ideas, read books, theoretical or otherwise, read text, develop an understanding of what that means, just to play around with like what the fuck I'm even doing with my mind when I'm trying to do this shit, like what's happening, paying attention to the processes by which my mind meanders through these different intellectual trajectories in an attempt to try and like coalesce into what we would call thought or words, and still being able to like dive back and forth into like the amorphous, nebulous continuity of all things around us, and then also be like a functioning human being, figure out how to dip into that psychedelic kaleidoscopic state at will, using intellect in a very particular way to do so. Like, that's what's fun. And it just reminds me, doing something like this, well, I took a break from it because I felt like I put a lot of pressure on it unduly as a result of other shit I was going through. Like, being in front of this now, I'm like, oh, it's really fun to just read stuff, think about stuff, talk about stuff. I don't have to overcomplicate that. And if I continue to do those things, then, choosing this path is not just a career path, but it remains like the path that I've chosen like for my life. These are the things that I like to do that make me happy and fulfilled. And I don't need to do them because I'm gonna get something out of it. And it's okay to like sink effort, time into things that I enjoy without expecting a return on investment. And just that, even thinking about those ROI words, like, look, man, I'm not against making money. Like, I just don't think that I need to think about shit that I like doing exclusively in those terms, because for me, it kind of pushes me away from doing anything in general. If I think about it like, oh, I need to do this to get bread, like, I won't do it. I don't know why. It's just, that's just how I feel about it, But if I just keep it like fun, then the money will come, type of shit, So this is like a good, like, I'm just very happy to be able to do this. I'm not even doing much. I'm just sitting at a desk in my own place, like just chilling. I mean, not like my own place, like I own the place or whatever, but like I'm in a place that is where I can lay my head, where I can sit and just be with deep thoughts. That's what it's all supposed to be about. So, yeah, anyways, I'm going to get started on what we got to do this week. This week is, so I'm taking, since I think my last session, I think was during my last quarter of school, the winter quarter. So I'm pretty firmly in the spring quarter now, last quarter of my first year of my PhD program. I'm taking 2 new classes. Yeah, so this was 2 months ago. Yeah. So yeah, it's definitely been about 8 weeks. Yeah. So I'm in the news section now, and I'm doing. Last quarter, I took a medieval manuscript class, and I took a Renaissance lit class that kind of like wasn't really Renaissance literature, but like that was kind of like the theme of it was from Ovid to COVID. So discussion of like Renaissance literatures, Shakespearean texts, and then moving into more modern, modernist, postmodernist poetry, visual media texts, thinking about their relationship to like catastrophe. So it was basically one thinking about like catastrophe was the big one, and the medieval manuscript class, it was just like media. Like, how do we distinguish, like how is knowledge produced, created, disseminated? How is what we consider media influenced in different ways of like remediation? I think that's from a Jessica Brantley. I think had an idea of remediation. She's a medieval scholar. And then Johanna Drucker's book on graphesis, talking about the ways that like digital media are reflective of like medieval manuscripts and shit like that, and like basically how like knowledge changes. We're in a big knowledge transition stage, so thinking about like media as transformative and its meaning as pluripotential was super interesting. The Ovid Djokovic class was a discussion of catastrophe as it is depicted in different texts, personal catastrophe, financial catastrophe, global cataclysm, utopia, dystopia, all those kinds of things. Basically, like when society or the individual or any level of those things gets like incredibly fucked beyond recognition, what happens? Are we ever out of that state? Is there any post that state? What are the considerations that go into like thinking about catastrophe? How do we consider catastrophe as like a marker and how do we consider what's going on pre-catastrophe, during, and then post? Like, what are the distinctions in that timeline? Is that necessary? Is it unnecessary? Is it useful? Is it not? Probably somewhere in between, and then trying to distinguish what those caveats bring up. Did a project for the medieval class comparing the digital booklet of Kendrick Lamar's To Pimp a Butterfly album as doing a comparative reading of it in relation to illuminated medieval manuscripts, and showing how that tradition, not Eurocentric tradition, but interestingly the connections between a Eurocentric tradition and an Afrocentric production, the Eurocentric in the past, the Afrocentric in modern times, the connectivities between the two, not in lineage, but in just the interesting qualities of how the mediums function in similar ways. And then for my the catastrophe class, I looked at, I'm really interested in like non-duality, Advaita Vedanta philosophy of Hinduism. It's like that idea of things not being the same and not being different either. And using Attack on Titan as a way to examine non-duality, specifically through consideration of necropolitics and Attack on Titan. So I had me reading a lot about like necropolitics, so post-colonialism, manga studies, how do you want to say, and post-colonialism, manga studies, and non-duality philosophy. So that kind of like was really interesting to work through. This quarter, I'm taking a class on, it's a poetics course, a seminar on poetics, and a seminar on decolonial performance. The decolonial performance course is, I can actually read you the syllabus heading, course description and overview. Grad seminar on theater performance artists who wrestle with legacies of colonialism. So we're studying, we're on our 7th week now, so we've been studying theater, manifestos, plays, digital media, documentary films, performance art by Latinx, Native American, Caribbean, Latin American artists, contemporary feminist and queer aesthetic practices, examining the insidious imprints, lasting effects of early colonial period, considering questions like how does colonialism impact afterlives of the colony across the Americas? What do these archives of art reveal about the links that bind and bond the past with the present? How do queer and indigenous artists envision our present futures? What's beyond the colony? From Cherry Moraga's famous Chicana theorist, I guess you would say theorist, artist, theorist, Chicana feminist writer is how it is said in the course description. What does a decolonial performance of freedom entail? And a lot of that is thinking about like, okay, so there's like the colony, like this fuck shit, right? Ergo, or like read colonialism, like eras of fuck shit. Okay, Spanish do it, French do it, British do it, Americans do it. Everybody participates in this shit. There's a particularly Eurocentric power paradigm that comes from like colonialism. Like people say like, yo, it'd be happening everywhere. Yeah, but it's not happening like with the amount of bread that these particular colonial efforts are working, the ways in which there's a lasting legacy. So like the idea of, thinking about the distinctions of like anti-colonial and post-colonial and decolonial. Anti-colonial being like, we need to be opposed to the colony. Post-colonial, assuming that like we are after the colony now, like that was then, this is now type shit. Decolonial, kind of talking about coloniality, how a lot of that shit persists. Like a lot of the not just like the legislative reverberations, but also like linguistic, theoretical, ideological reverberations persist. And thinking about like different ways to think about the world. Now this course is specifically like indigenous, Native American, Caribbean, Latino, Latinx writers, artists, thinkers. And so for me, it was like really interesting because even the consideration of the word Indian, when I'm thinking like I'm an Indian person from India, and thinking about the etymological roots of like Indian as regards people from like the Indus Valley civilizations, and Indian as part of the in the Spanish term is indio, and just like the man, just the completely fucked degradation of these cultures as a result of colonialism, European colonialism, Spanish colonialism, maybe in more particularity, and just like the different ways that knowledge can be thought of. Now, the thing that I thought of when I'm thinking about this is like oral tradition versus written traditions of knowledge. We have like pre-history, pre-recorded history, and we talk about it like, oh, this is before knowledge was produced in a way that we consider to be the tantamount way of producing knowledge, writing. Because writing creates a displacement, as according to my poetics professor. A lot of my classes feed into each other without knowing it. That's kind of, I believe that's the point. But when you write something down, you don't have to be there for someone to like get your ideas. Whereas when you transmit it orally, without recording equipment, like you could say, hey, that's why podcasts are so big, is because you can transfer that oral knowledge without, it adds the displacement of writing to the technology of oral speech. But there's the distinction there being that there's shit you only know when you're talking to someone face to face together in a room, right? We can all kind of agree that there's a particular sliver of knowledge production that is occurring in that field, or in that like purview, and like a consideration of those, like how those knowledges create, how those forms of knowing can create a completely different idea of knowing, of knowledge, of wisdom, of thought, of meaning, ontology, epistemology, as opposed to written work. And writing itself very much either monolithizes or binarily distinguishes ideas because of like the way that you have to work really hard to be nuanced in writing. It leans, without the proper awareness and judicious capacity, it does lean towards either like a monolithic production of like a representation of an idea, or like a binarily distinguished representations of ideas. Oral knowledge is allowing for that like in between space of play where nuance, inflection, connotation, stuff like that comes up. And those are the things that we value the most in like good writing, because it's considered to be like broader than just like everything's one thing and everything's two things. So that's a decolonial performance class. It's super interesting. Lots of really cool art and theatrical work, and discussion of the practice and theory of performance as forms of knowledge. You can think about one of the examples was, I think Cherry Moraga was talking about how she got a bunch of kids to be in like a play, and she was talking about how, you know, asking them to act out certain things and then like giving them certain like really vague direction and yet having them perform it in an incredibly embodied sense, and that connection between like saying something that doesn't really like attach itself easily to a physical manifestation or representation of that thing you're trying to say, and like how it's able to produce itself in real life. Oh, did my speaker go out? No, we're good. Yeah, so and then let's see, why does it keep beeping like that? I wonder, is that low battery or something? Maybe is there like a charger or some shit on this thing? That's an aux cord. That's a USB. Situation. Yeah, I think that keeps doing it. I'll figure it out. Anyways, yeah, and so that's really awesome. I enjoy it a lot. We're working on. We have to have we've had presentations, courses, syllabus. We have to make a syllabus. We have to write a final paper, shit like that. The poetic seminar is when I'm really getting like in my bag, thinking about linguistics and meaning and representation and metonymy versus metaphor, or metonymy and metaphor, how they work together to help us understand the manner in which that we can substitute. Like a metaphor is when you take two things that are not the same and you connect them via some level of interconnectedness that they share in a way that people can understand if you explain it to them. And then like metonymy, substituting a part of it for the whole, in order to show a distinction between an individual unit and like the collective. Now that the problem with these things is that they can risk, like when we use metaphor and metonymy in like a legal sense, or like a not legal sense, but let's say like an incredibly literal as opposed to a figurative sense, shit can get kind of weird as far as what meaning is. What do you mean by that? How is a leaf falling like blood from my lips in the last kiss I give before sealed in my grave, or some shit, like connection of kisses and graves and kiss of death and seals and seal, grave, dead, and why are leaves like blood? Like, what do they share? Is it just falling? Is it the trembling nature of it? I don't know, whatever. There's all this shit that happens. Your mind starts to fucking blossom when you start to consider figurative language, metaphor and metonymy together. Pen is mightier than the sword. What does that mean? Well, I'm using pen to mean this, I'm using sword to mean that, and then you add a bigger understanding of whatever the fuck it is you're trying to think about. I don't know, it's really really interesting. For both courses, I'm going to be examining the Bhagavad Gita, the first chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, the Arjuna Vishad Yoga, and I'm going to be, the Yoga of Despondency. I'm going to be talking about, in the poetics class, I'm going to be examining the poetics of it. In the decolonial class, I'm going to be examining the manner in which Arjun's reticence to engage speaks to a decolonial perspective. The ways that it's, what did I have written down? I think I had it on my notes. Let me see. It is 289. Oh, 250. Yeah, no, it's on Google Docs. And I gotta go to my other user. For my 252 final drafts, I'm going to be looking at how the Arjuna Vishad Yoga is indicative of decolonial thought. The challenge to dominant paradigms, questioning the legitimacy of war, authority of societal norms, expectation placed on individuals based on caste and social positions, the critique of external authority, self-determination and resistance, embracing pluralism and inclusion, The importance of noting that the potential decolonial aspects of it are, trying to figure out a way to engage with sensitivity and further analysis and dialogue with diverse perspectives without trying to make this like a monolithic or binary distinction, and just talking about, Arjun, before he gets convinced by Krishna to go, do the rah-rah shit, is basically sitting there with all of his rational faculties explaining to like himself, like, this is a totally fucked situation, we should not be doing this, and we don't need to be doing this. And you can look at it Liz, you can look at it however the fuck you want, and this is not my definitive reading, that's just what I'm saying. And that's kind of how I feel, because as an American born Indian person, it's really, I have a very like an American born Indian person who's like well read, well studied in my own culture and heritage, and also like have been there in terms of, I gotta water my plant, in terms of, I have family there, I've been there a lot. Now granted, like, I'm just a South, like my family's all South Delhi people, I know what the fuck it is, but I'm not unaware of the inner kind of workings of just like living and being in India. Not as intimately as they are, obviously, but having that dual perspective really provides an inroad to think about these things differently, which I think is super important, especially considered the rise of like Hindutva and like nationalism. And I understand that shit having to come as like a necessary consequence of trying to develop a national identity after moving Britishers out of the British Raj, like out of India. But like, I don't know, man, that whole idea, like all of that seems kind of antithetical to this shit that I'm reading. And I get to read this stuff, I kind of feel this way about a lot of religious texts I read. I'm just like, yeah, if you just look at it as poetics and historical documents, not like documents, not things that document history, just documents from history that also have like poetic resonance and cultural significance, and they have a context, they have a historical context. But it's not like it's the thing that I'm doing with metaphor, right? It's like able to look at this shit without, like, with the historical context, but choosing when to, like, being able to understand it in like more varied ways than just those contexts. And I don't know, it's very interesting, and that could be considered unreasonable, or like, I don't know, even potentially like Orientalist. But it's like, dude, I can't make everybody happy. Like, what am I supposed to do? I'm not gonna make the identity, I can make all those like different arguments, the identity argument, the fucking most of it will be couched in the identity argument, right? Like, I have a right to say this kind of shit because I'm Indian or whatever. But I don't even think it means that. I just want to talk about this stuff because I think it's interesting, and I just find like a great deal of hypocrisy in people talking about like using the Gita as like a book to push like Hindu nationalism, when really it's a book that's like, I don't know, when I read it, I'm just like, bro, this is how you convince people of TINA type shit. There's no alternative. It doesn't matter that you feel all that shit, you gotta do it anyway. I'm just not buying that. And I don't know what the answer is. As GSP, the great GSP once said, I know it is wrong what I do, criticizing without providing an alternative, but that's what the fuck it is, man. I don't know. Anyways, those are things that I'm thinking about right now. I'm going to do some reading for both of my classes. I have a abstract and a list of sources due for my decolonial class on Tuesday. We don't have class, but it is due. We have the syllabus for our dream course we're building. I think I'm gonna do it on manga. God, dude. Yeah, manga studies, and just trying to see like how to structure like a 10 week, twice a week, so 20 session course over 10 weeks to talk about those things. Those things meaning like manga and how I don't know, maybe I had these in my notes, but. There's so many different things you could talk about. You can talk about like feminist theory, you can talk about eco-criticism, you can talk about queer theory, you can talk about economic, like geopolitical relationships, economics, sports. There's like any multitude of things could be discussed through manga. Honestly, I think it'd just be a sick way to get people to talk about deep ideas by getting young people to do some shit that I'm not even gonna get into it right now. That is cool now, but like what definitely was not cool when I was coming up, which is super fucked up. Like I'm not into that. In a way, I'm still a hater. Like I'm kind of like, damn, that's sad, bro. Like you're telling me that I could be like a young person and be cool in high school right now. I could have been cool like my entire elementary, middle, high school career just because I fuck with anime and manga this much. Like crazy. Happy for the young ones. Still slightly resentful, but I don't carry it around with me, you know. And I want to bring that love of manga to this generation with also having that like deeper eye towards the more intricate concepts that are available to us in these different sorts of works. So I'm just gonna be reading a bunch of shit, and then the fuck else? The fuck? Yeah, just reading and getting that ready for getting my proposal stuff ready, project proposal ready for Tuesday. I don't really have anything to do for the poetic seminar except just reading and then working on my final paper. That's due early mid June. That's just gonna be, you know, the seminar paper, and then for the decolonial class, the professor wants the syllabus on the dream course by the end of the course, so around the same time that the poetic seminar paper is due, and then a couple of weeks after that, and he's giving us time to like work on the seminar paper after we're technically out of class, which is cool. I mean, doing all three at once with like similar deadlines would be, you know, doable, but like a little bit just like the being able to just like divvy up all that work, pay the close attention to that work would require like slightly more tinkering with like workflow and such. But yeah, I'm excited that it's the way that it's set up, and then first year's gonna be over. So okay, let's get started. I'm just gonna like, you know, pomodoro my shit. I'm gonna smoke my shit, and then we're gonna get started. Okay, give me 1 sec. Let me just pop back in and out of focus. My water bottle, gallon jug, weed. Okay. Let's fucking go, bro. Ugh. Fucking go. As always, oh, what's that dude's name? Is it on YouTube? What's his name? Faded in a hoe. Faded in a hoe. Faded in a hoe. Fulcrum, come in. Yodi. Gang, that's very funny. I think that kid's very, very funny. I love that energy. I don't know. Anyways. Oh, did I even start the thing? Yeah. Damn, there's so much shit we didn't read, man. Fuck. That's okay. Crazy. So this was just an extra reading from the poetics course. I want to read you something it says here about the personal poem, okay? The personal poem, or any truly personal piece of writing, in fact, may be said to begin with deep contradictions, with passions and ideas that oppose and refute each other, and that yet exist simultaneously, and with all the frustration and growing self-awareness that accompany this familiar type of suffering, the stuff of life itself, as the poet struggles for meaning. Any satisfying meaning for this sort of struggle must be found in the poem itself, or in the poet in the poem, not in the outside world. The poem is the locus of reconciliation of opposed passions. That, to me, is like, isn't that what it's all about? And by it all, I mean the very fabric of our ontology and epistemological considerations in the view of the world. Is it not just, yo, can we take this shit that is so at odds with each other and figure out a way to build that? Like, when you build a bridge, is it not part of the water? Is it not part of the land? Is it not part of either side? To be in the middle of the bridge, is that really to be separated from all the things? To be on one side, does that mean to not understand the other? Does it have to be? And like, why are we always reaching for that intersectional distinction when it comes to doing fuck shit, and when it comes to being like, just trying to understand people who come from a place other than us? When it comes to purporting our own worldview, then the intersectional becomes incredibly just like obvious. And when it comes to purporting the worldview of someone who is diametrically opposed to us, then it can't be done. And then people will be like disingenuous and then be like, what are you saying? Is it like okay to be a Nazi? What the fuck is wrong with you? How about that? How about that's non-duality, right? It's like being able to understand the distinctions are there, but like there is a way to understand a bridge and like the sides it's on in the water as being a monolith. There's ways to understand it as like sides of the bridge. But then there's like considerations from every single different vantage point around it. Gives you all those fragmentary considerations, give you an understanding of what's going on. And when we like coalesce them into like evil that we can point our finger at, the danger then becomes in forgetting to highlight all the other interfragmentary ways in which fucked up shit can occur. And what people will do is, if it's not, nowadays people will be like, oh, you calling anybody a Nazi? And it's like, yeah, that can be an issue, because like when you're trying to label things as something that you can close off in a particular way from consideration of this nuanced non-dual perspective, the risk is in fragmenting, or the risk is in not seeing all the other fragmentary ways in which things that could be cursorily connected to this particular form of evil may be extant in other forms of ideological or otherwise interaction. And that is like a constant convo, man. It's hard to figure out, because it really requires people deeply examining their own fallacious considerations. People can be clever and fallacious at the same time, like easily so, often are. And missing the boat is what kind of doesn't allow people to like connect, I don't know, it's just like, and when I'm trying, I don't even know, like, deep consideration is so hard. It's so fucking exhausting. And when you're trying to do it with like, oh, what the fuck happened? Did it die? No? Yeah. I don't know. Just saying that it's like, I talk to my friend all the time about this. I talk to a friend of mine all the time about how like, dude, you got some shit you got to be like, yeah, that's fuck no. That's a fuck no for sure. That's like, some things do require a monolithic understanding. Some things do require a binary distinction, but others don't. And that consideration of all of those different forms does not fall into the first two, but into the third, if at all. And I don't know, I'm just kind of going now. Anyways, I love that. reconciliation of deeply opposed things. I think that is the charger. I think I need to charge this motherfucker. The question is, do I have one? Here. Okay. Shit makes me feel like everything I do is Blade Runner-esque. Love it.
goals.